Madam Secretary, thank you for your incredible service to our country. I remember when you were sitting here for your confirmation hearing, and there are those who had questions. I think you have more than dissipated all those questions, and you've just done an extraordinary job. I want to talk about Iran. I hope you would agree with me that our best peaceful diplomacy tool left to us to stop Iran's march towards nuclear weapons is the vigorous enforcement of the sanctions policy that we presently have, particularly the Central Bank of Iran. Would you agree that that is our best peaceful diplomacy tool?
It is certainly probably the highest priority tool. We have other tools, but I think your characterization is right.
And in that context, then, with respect to the implementation of the central bank sanctions that will begin to take effect tomorrow with respect to non-petroleum transactions, I have concerns about the subjective criteria that will be used by the Department to determine whether a country has achieved significant reductions in purchases of refined petroleum. I would have preferred that we had some scale, but I've heard the arguments why having a subjective criteria may be better. But can I presume that in the absence of a national security waiver under the law, that all countries will be required to actually make significant reductions in their purchases during each of the 180-day period?
Yes, our expectation and the direction we are giving to countries is that we do expect to see significant reductions. And I am pleased to report, Senator, that we've been aggressively reaching out to and working with countries to assist them in being able to make such significant reductions. You know, for some countries, it's a lot harder than other countries, and so we have really come in with a lot of suggestions to help them be able to do what we're asking them to do.
I appreciate hearing that we expect to see them make significant reductions in each of those 180-day periods, because I think it sends a very clear message to our allies abroad, joining with the Europeans that already are pursuing an oil embargo, about the seriousness of this nature. In that respect, what progress can you tell us with reference to countries like China, India, and Turkey?
Well, I think with respect to China and Turkey and India, we've had very intense and very blunt conversations with each of those countries. I think that there are a number of steps that we are pointing out to them that we believe they can and should make. I also can tell you that in a number of cases, both on their government side and on their business side, they are taking actions that go further and deeper than perhaps their public statements might lead you to believe. And we're going to continue to keep an absolute foot on the pedal in terms of our accelerated, aggressive outreach to them. And they are looking for ways to make up the lost revenues, the lost crude oil. That's a difficulty for a lot of these countries, not just the ones you mentioned. So we've had to put together an entire team to try to assist them in thinking through ways of doing that.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think the stronger and more uniform the message is, the less challenges we'll have in having countries try to join us in common cause towards something that is in their mutual national security interests. This is not just about the United States, not just about Israel, and certainly not even about the European Union. It's about all that region and certainly beyond. One final question in this regard. I know that several of us wrote a letter to the President about the P5+1 talks and where that would head. And some of us are concerned that the Iranians, to gain time, would just simply enter into a negotiation thinking that either the sanctions would cease or that, that their enrichment facilities and centrifuges would not be part of the discussion on the table. Can you give me a sense of the conditions that we are going to be looking at as it relates to any such talks?
Well, as we've done since 2009, within the P5+1, we've pursued this dual-track policy, and we have had a policy of pressure and a policy of engagement, and we've used these escalating sanctions as a way to persuade Iran to engage with us. And there's two things we've been very clear about. First, as outlined in Cathy Ashton's letter to Iran, any conversation anywhere with Iran has to begin with a disposition of their nuclear program. I mean, that is the -- issue. And Iran's response to her letter appears to acknowledge and accept that. Second, we have been working with our colleagues in the P5+1 to set forth the actions we expect Iran to take that would have to be verifiable, would have to be sustainable, because there has to be some guarantee to the international community that, assuming they were willing to come into compliance with their international obligations, that they would actually do so in a way that was not reversible, or certainly not immediately reversible. So we're a long way from having any assurance as to what Iran would or would not do in the P5+1. But I can certainly assure you, Senator, that there's not going to be any front loading of concessions on our part. This is going to be a very hard-nosed negotiation, and we are joined by the P5+1 in that kind of approach.
Well, I thank you for that. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And I'll just close by saying I know that everything cannot be a priority in the world, because although I'm sure everything is important in the world, but certainly I want to call your attention to what's happening here in our own hemisphere. And I appreciate that probably more than any other Secretary of State. Your travel to the hemisphere has been extraordinary. Important to us when we see the erosion of democracy within the hemisphere, the erosion of free press within the hemisphere, the influences that Iran and China are seeking within the hemisphere right in our own front yard. So I hope that we'll continue to work with you on that. And I will have a question for the record on Camp Ashraf. I'm concerned about the transition to Camp Liberty and what goes on there, and I look forward to your response there.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Menendez.